horrifying case. It is of Lindsay Clancy. She is the 32-year-old woman accused of killing her 3 young kids. So a Massachusetts court has now released nearly 300 pages of documents this week, including 11 search warrants. And what they do is they give us a glimpse into what police unfortunately saw the day they responded to the Duxbury home in January.
Just got a notification in that Melody Ferris was found guilty. Melody Ferris is guilty. That's another case that I actually was going to cover. There's so many freaking layers to it. All right.
January of this year. And by the way, just for geography, Duxbury is on the coast. It's about an hour south of Boston. So according to investigators, Clancy sent her husband, Patrick, to go get food from a restaurant and medication from one of the children at CVS. And while he was gone, she allegedly strangled all 3 of her children with exercise bands. 5-year-old daughter, Cora, 3-year-old son, Dawson, 8-month-old son, Callan. She then apparently jumped out of a second-story window of the house in an effort to try to kill herself. She didn't die. First responders, they noted cuts on her wrists and neck that were likely self-inflicted. This is according to the court documents. But Clancy's attorney says that his client, who was a labor and delivery nurse herself, had postpartum psychosis and was overly medicated. Clancy was ordered to remain committed to a state hospital for months. And according to her attorney, she suffered spinal injuries that have left her paralyzed. And on Thursday, the state took the courtroom to Clancy, arraigning her in what looks like a meeting room at the hospital.
The defendant wrote a note on her phone on October 25th, 2022, stating, "I think I sort of resent my other children because they prevent me from treating Cal like my first baby." She also wrote, "I want to feel love and connection with all of my kids." This would indicate that she did not feel love or connection with at least some of her kids. She then wrote she wants to have more kids eventually. 4 days prior to killing her children, the defendant did an internet search on her phone, and it was, quote, "Can you treat a sociopath?"
She obviously had no reason to kill those 3 beautiful children. You have to ask yourself, why? Why? And when you ask yourself why, and you consider all of these factors, it's readily apparent as you judge that this woman was a troubled soul.
So with all of that in mind, it's time to go over some of what was revealed in these newly released or unsealed documents. And to do that, I want to bring in a fan favorite here at Sidebar, evidence expert and famed law professor Jules Epstein from Temple University Beasley School of Law. Professor Epstein, Jules, great to see you. Wish it was under better circumstances because this case is really just one of the worst that we've covered in quite some time. I'd like to start with what law enforcement collected. So from the warrants, we learned that this list includes exercise bands, medications, phones, computers, notebooks, cameras, a bloody knife, pajamas. What do you make of what was collected in the home?
What I make first is that this is an incredibly thorough and well-organized investigation. The next thing is, in Massachusetts, if there's a severe mental health issue and what is called a claim of lack of criminal responsibility is raised, the government, the prosecution, has to prove she was sane beyond a reasonable doubt. And so everything here, A, just goes to prove who did it, but B, really importantly, focuses on what we call in the law.
The second aspect was it wasn't just collecting these items. They found that the notebooks and the phone contained documentation of her meds, her mental state, what she thought of the kids, her thoughts on suicide, and apparently researching ways to kill. That says a lot, right?
It says an awful lot and actually could be evidence both for sanity and insanity. And let me explain where I'm going with that. From the prosecution side, everything that shows planning, deliberateness, getting other people out of the way is an argument that this person was proceeding rationally, even if they are mentally ill. from the defense side, it's, of course, there's some planning. Even if someone is extremely mentally ill, it can be the delusion, it can be the crazed belief that makes them then sit down and go through this horrible, horrible planning. In other words, let me be clear. There can be an insanity defense, even if someone looked into an escape route or planned to keep people out of the way, if all of that is generated.
I just want to pause for a second, because when this initially came out and this occurred, I remember reading that she was on an extremely high amount of antipsychotics, or she was like on one transitioning to another one, but like they were somewhat overlapping. Me as someone who struggles with mental health, this is something that I would always fear, is like finding the right. I've just been, thank God, very, very lucky when it comes to getting on medication. I know my body really well. When I'm not feeling right, I know, okay, hey, this isn't going to work. And I talk with my doctor immediately. Just personally speaking, I remember having such horrible postpartum after I had my twin boys. Never like did I have any sort of ideations like anything like this, but it was a sense of depression that was so extreme. But I knew what I had to do. I knew that I had to go back to my psychiatrist, I had to stop breastfeeding. I had to get back on my medicine. I knew what I needed to do, but that doesn't mean that everybody does. And I believe that there are women who struggle so much silently with postpartum, and then are so eager to just find a pill that makes them able to cope with motherhood. And I have 3 children. I had twins at one time, obviously. So, and I had them at 20 years old. That was a very big deal. Just motherhood in general, and then mental illness on top of that. I have such compassion for this case when it comes to the mental health aspect, and I believe that women can get into a psychosis and do things that they should not do. But I also am a logical human being, and I believe that you have to, if you know you're not good there, if you are finding yourself typing notes like, I feel like this, I feel like that, that is a sign you need to go to the doctor. You need to be like, honey, I need to go check myself into the hospital. I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling safe with the kids. I'm not feeling safe with myself. I can't be who I need to be, and I need to take care of myself. Not doing that is on her. So, I mean, I just wanted to say my piece on that.
My word, by a severe delusion. But certainly, the more it seems normal, none of this is normal, but normal in the sense of, oh, that's how I would do it. If I were trying to get away with it, then that helps the prosecution. There's one last thing, if I may, and that is the immediate suicide attempt afterwards. Again, I think each side can play that. This was all part of a plan. I can't stand my life. I can't stand the children. This is too much. I'm taking them out. I'm taking myself out. Or this is psychotic break. do some horrible things. Oh my God, look what I've done, when the psychotic break, if you will, diminishes, and then immediate regret.
That's an interesting line there, because we always assume that if somebody knows what they're doing is illegal and they're trying to escape responsibility, how on earth could they be insane? But if they're motivated by that delusion, then I think it's really important, as you said, they could still be in the planning, which leads me to another. For me, at least, I didn't know this. This is from the court documents that she allegedly used Apple Maps on her phone to, quote, determine the time it would take someone to travel from her home to 3V in Plymouth. 3V is the restaurant that she sent her husband to get food. So it seems she was trying to figure out how long that would be, because in that time frame she could kill the kids. But that still, you believe, is something that could be used by both sides.
Well, the defense has no choice.
Yeah.
There are lots and lots of facts of planning. And when you have that, they're there. Then the question is there credible psychiatric testimony that says, yes, that's exactly right. But it's all the product of some delusional belief system or some severe mental illness that prevented her from knowing the difference between right and wrong.
Let's amplify that, because the documents also say that she was acting normal before all of this happened. There was testimony, from people who said they didn't notice anything that strange. However, Patrick, her husband, had told law enforcement that Clancy had seen psychiatrists, that she was prescribed medications like Zoloft, Valium, Prozac. There was evidence that she might have been suffering from withdrawals from benzodiazepines. That's something, again, in the documents, that Patrick may have told a third party about what Lindsay was going through. What are your thoughts on that information?
One is just, we all need to know that insanity is not a 24/7 condition. In the law, actually, we hear people talk about insanity and temporary insanity, but there is no such thing as non-temporary insanity. Insanity is at the time of the commission of the crime. So that somebody can be, quote, normal, calm, rational, and then have that psychological break, psychotic break, and be in a period of insanity. Or it can be, this isn't insanity, it's terrible. She just got so depressed. She was able to carry on day to day until she couldn't anymore, and then took action.
We know that in that state, I think it was only a few months ago, I don't believe it's been passed, but there's an effort to try to pass legislation that postpartum depression can be a legal defense, the same way insanity could be a defense. In other words, that a jury could find her not guilty based on that postpartum depression, and she would be seeking mental health treatment as opposed to going to prison. What are your thoughts on that? And if, let's say, that becomes the law, would this kind of case classify as she should be found not guilty, be based on postpartum depression over medication, as her attorney claims?
So there are really two parts to that, if I may. One
Sure.
is, even if they make that a defense, she would still have to prove that this was actually postpartum depression at the level of whatever the statute defines it as. The second is a spin on that, and that's the medication thing.
Yep.
Certain states have what's called an involuntary intoxication concept, where if I'm taking medication that my doctor ordered, right? I'm not going out and buying heroin and drugs on the street corner. And the medication, through no fault of my own, creates that psychotic state. That may be a defense. I'm sorry I didn't get to research that for Massachusetts law. But postpartum depression,
Yeah.
the answer is what's this state's definition?
Right.
Medically, can we prove that it fits her?
I'm not going to.
So there is a law, is what I'm getting from this, or going to be a law passed for postpartum depression for women after they have I can't tell you what postpartum feels like all in words other than hell. It's existing and just an utter sadness. Just the thought of it makes me want to cry. I didn't have it that I remember. I don't really think I had it much at all with my daughter, but I was 28 when I had my daughter, 20 when I had my sons, and it's something that I think that the defense will have a very strong chance of winning a trial, but I don't think that she should just walk free. I think that she would need to be in an institution, because what would stop her from getting pregnant again and the same thing happening? So you can't take that chance. And yeah.
I'll hold you that because you read basically all 300 pages of these affidavits. So you did your homework. You did your homework, Jules. And speaking of that, another detail that we learned is that investigators took blood and urine samples from Lindsay Clancy. They also took swabs underneath her fingernails. Why'd they do that?
Okay, let's work backwards. The swabs are easy. If I am strangling somebody, maybe there will be under my fingernails something from those exercise cords or my kid's DNA. In terms of the medication, I think that's incredibly important and probably important to both sides.
So I do have my tablet here, and I was just looking up some the actual New Yorker that he did the interview with, and he states in here the real Lindsay was generously loving and caring, Pat wrote. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. Within days, the GoFundMe raised more than $1 million. Lindsay's attorney, Kevin Reddington, laid the groundwork for an insanity defense, arguing that she suffered from severe postpartum depression and possibly postpartum psychosis, a rare disorder that is estimated to affect 1 or 2 in 1,000 new mothers, usually within weeks of childbirth, and which in perhaps 4% of those cases is linked to infanticide. Lindsay, however, hadn't been diagnosed as having either condition the day before the killings. In a note on her iPhone, she mentioned just a touch of postpartum anxiety. She said that she'd strangle the children during a moment of psychosis after hallucinating a voice. But according to Sprague, she never reported hallucinations until after she'd met with her defense team. In the prosecution's telling, she looked like a scheming sociopath who So whoever wrote this they need a grammatical check.
Depending on how complete what we call toxicology screen is done, it will reveal what meds she was on, whether she took the prescribed amount or too little or too much, and possibly the interactions among those medications. And then doctors can say, well, actually, on those meds in that amount, she shouldn't have been psychotic. Or, oh my
Mm.
goodness, on those meds in that amount, she was not able to deal properly because the meds triggered something.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And I think that's going to be crucial in this kind of case to try to understand what happened. I'll talk about what happened. We also learned in these documents the injuries to the kids. And I mean, I'll tell you right now, I don't like talking about this. When it comes to injuries to children, when it talks about death of children, it's very tough for me to get into it. But I will give everybody a sampling of what we've seen here. So apparently from the autopsy, when we talk about Cora and Dawson, there was petechiae. There was small bruisings on the right arm, small bruisings on both sides of both legs, heavy lungs, obviously ligatures around the neck, but no evidence of blunt force trauma, brain bloods, and or skull fractures, no soft tissue damage in the back. What do you make of that? Those kind, and there's more, but they kind of give you a sample of some of the injuries that were sustained by these kids.
So petechiae, if I understand it correctly, is a common sign following some sort of strangulation. So, and I'm probably going to describe this wrong, but as we're constricting the flow of blood, there are little marks that show up in the eyes. The bruises, we're going to have to see where they line up. If they line up with the child being held down or grabbed, I mean, kids get bruises.
Yep.
But these ones, we'd have to say, what do they match up with? I have no idea. And I don't want to have to think about it or ask your
Yeah.
listeners to have to think about it. How she did this to 3 children. I mean, one was an infant,
Right.
but the other 2 were older. How she did this without tons of struggling and scratching by the kids and things like that, I don't know. And again, maybe too horrific to imagine. What we're going to really need there is a really good forensic pathologist who can look at those bruises and say they're consistent with scenario A or scenario B.
Yeah, and there was also the accounts of the responding officers, and I mean that was just so chilling. Where they're talking about responding to the scene, they're screaming. Patrick's coming in and out of the house. One of the officers rushes to the ambulance. I mean, it just, even on paper, reading it was very difficult, and it kind of transports you to that scene. There's so much more we could talk about in these warrants, Jules. I mean, one other thing that I think if we wanted to end on was people would look at this and say, what was Patrick? You know, he was not there. Well, law enforcement, the way that I saw it, they found surveillance footage of the CVS where he was. He was not in that home.
So we will see what happens. I will link the husband's interview through the New Yorker under this video, just in case there's anybody who's interested. It's long, so I'm not gonna sit here and read it to you. I mean, I would if you wanted me to, but no one's requested that. So, I got a couple more videos that I plan on putting out this week, but that's all for this one. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next one.